Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated. In each episode, we'll get together with other professionals and have fun talking about trust and estate matters. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Now here are the hosts of Simplifying the Complicated, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher.
Hello, I'm Lori Bolander.
And I'm Lauren Gallagher.
Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated. This is the show where we talk about trust and estates and related topics. Today, we're going to simplify the complicated around 1031 exchanges. I know I'm excited to learn more about this topic. And luckily, we have an expert here today. Today, our guest is Adam Nishikawa, and he's the Vice President of Asset Exchange Company. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. It's luckily a little bit cooler today than it has been. So hopefully that everybody's feeling a little better about that. I know it's been a scorching out there. Tell me a little about your company.
Asset Exchange Company is a qualified intermediary. So essentially, our sole purpose is to help people defer taxes and help them from their sale escrow to their purchase escrow.
Perfect. And we probably should kind of start at the beginning, because I think there might be people that don't even know what a 1031 exchange is. I know that a lot of my clients come to me after the fact and I say, well, you could have done a 1031 exchange. They're like, what? So why did we start there?
Yeah, I always like to start with the basics. People don't know what they don't know, so it's always good to kind of go over and start from the beginning. So the 1031 exchange is a transaction which allows your investors or sellers to defer the payment of capital gains tax by exchanging like-kind investment property for like-kind investment property. And the big thing in that definition is it is a deferral program. So the 1031 exchange, being part of the tax code, is actually a tax deferred or a kicking the can down the road program. It's not tax-free money, but you do get to leverage those tax deferred funds to make your new purchase. The other part of that definition is that like-kind definition. So it is for investment property only.
Got it. And with capital gains, because I feel like some of my clients also don't really understand that, what is a capital gain? How does that occur?
Yeah, so I'm not a CPA, so I don't want to give any tax advice, but the capital gains are made up of several parts. You're going to have a long-term capital gain tax. You're going to have a state capital gain tax, at least here in California. You're going to have other parts of capital gains, such as depreciation recapture. There's a Medicare surcharge tax. There's a lot of taxes involved with the sale of investment property.
Got it. And basis is one of the things that we have to talk about a lot in trust and estates, because, we'll say to people, well, you get a step up in basis to your, mom's date of death or whatever. And people also don't know what that is, but that's kind of the metric that measures what your gain is, right? The basis is usually what you bought your property for or what you inherited it for in some cases.
Right. Yeah, there's a little bit of math that goes in there, but essentially I work with a lot of investors. They've owned the property for 10 years and it's doubled or tripled in value. And your capital gain is essentially exactly that. It's that gain from what you bought it for and what it's now selling for.
Which in California can be huge. I mean, I had a guy here in Point Loma that had bought his property for $5,400 in 1936.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had it valued when his wife died, and that was around, I don't know, 99 or so, and he almost fell off his chair because it was worth $520,000 then, and I mean, that property is probably worth $1.5 million at least now. It's just...
Yep.
So yeah, it can be a substantial gain for people, and especially in California, just the way our properties appreciate.
So you can use this 1031 exchange to really save on taxes all the way through your death and through distributions to your beneficiaries. You could really kick that tax bill down the road until you pass away. And with that stepped up basis, your beneficiaries could receive that property, that asset, and not pay any. Nobody pays the capital gains tax at all.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a morbid saying in my business, but it's defer, defer, die, because your heirs get that step up in basis. As far as estate planning goes, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, that's funny. I think you touched on this a little bit, but my next question was like, well, what's beneficial about this 1031 exchange? So I think you kind of went over like deferring this tax is really the big thing.
Yeah, so every investor has different investment goals. Obviously, the number one reason is deferring tax. I typically get calls from CPAs. Hey, my client is looking to sell this property. They need to do a 1031 exchange. They owe, several $100,000 in capital gain tax. So that's a pretty big driver of the business. But also, if they're investors and maybe they only have one property and they're a mom and pop investor, and during COVID, their tenant stopped paying, then maybe they're looking to diversify. So that's another big benefit of the 1031 is you can sell one property to buy multiple. And then it goes the other way around as well. I've got some condo investors that are tired of being condo investors, especially with the recent issues with fire insurance and the new balcony law, stuff like that. So they're looking to actually consolidate. So they're selling multiple properties to buy a single property. So consolidation, and then just simple growth and accumulation. I mean, like you were mentioning, your client bought that property for $5,000. If it's now worth $1.5 million, that's all cash sitting in there. And I doubt the rents would be giving them a big enough return to justify keeping all that cash parked in that one property. So if they can re-leverage it, go buy a $3 million property, a $5 million property, or something else.
What are the restrictions or the disadvantages of doing a 1031? Why wouldn't somebody do that? Is it just because you have that equity tied up? What are the other restrictions or disadvantages?
Yeah, some people they don't like debt, so they're not going to leverage anything.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my older clients, they don't want any debt on their books. So that's not the program for them. But a lot of times people not doing 1031 exchanges is usually because they're not qualified for some reason. A lot of people, like if you take a flip, for example, is a non-qualified, would not work for an exchange. It's considered short-term capital gain tax. The IRS considers that inventory. So they don't let you defer the taxes on a flip of a home.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like short-term holds. Or like foreign sellers. I work with a lot of foreign sellers, and the FERPTA withholding is pretty significant. And it can be $150,000 on the sale of $1 million home, and they are not going to get that money back from the IRS until after their exchange is complete. So they need that cash to come in and make the transaction whole. And so it's really just qualifying the reason people don't do it, or it just doesn't align with their goals.
Any time period you have to hold it once you've exchanged it? I mean, could you exchange it and then the next year sell it? And I don't know why you do it if you bother to exchange it, but could you do that and sell it at that point, or do you have to hold it for a certain number of years?
Yeah, the tax code does not specify an exact length of time, but we can tell from looking at case law and just from other transactions and people that have been audited, kind of to give a good timeline. This is supposed to be a long-term investment property. So that means it's going to be a longer than 12-month hold. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be a 24-month hold, on the shorter end. Now, I've had clients do exchanges, within that 12 to 24-month period, and they were not flips. They were qualified, they were held for long-term investment properties. They didn't like the performance, or, something was with the property, just didn't make it a good investment. So they just did another exchange into a new investment property. So there's no cut and dry answer if that's what you're looking for. But
we're used to that.
Yeah. What does it all entail? like cost wise, is it, is that a major factor to consider? What, I'm sure there's escrow fees and, fees for you. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we're basically, I kind of call us the escrow between your sale escrow and your purchase escrow. And so we get involved once escrow is opened on the sale property, and we will create the exchange agreement. That exchange agreement is in place to make sure that at the closing of that property, the money does not go to the client's personal account, because that would be a taxable event. So we hold the money in the meantime. The client will have 45 calendar days to identify potential replacement properties. And then they have to buy and close on one or all those replacement properties by the 180th day. So there is a finite amount of time. And for the service, we charge $1,250. And that's for one sale and up to 3 purchases.
Sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're saying I should up the price?
Yeah. Come on, Adam. Just gave you a raise.
Right?
Thank you.
There's so many like percentage-based things around real estate. Like, it's actually surprising that it's not like, oh, we're just going to take 1% of your gain money. And
Yeah.
I get asked that a lot, actually, especially when I have clients coming out of New York and stuff, and they're used to the attorneys and everyone taking a percentage. They're asking me, so is yours 1% as well? And I'm like, I wish.
yeah, right.
Is that industry standard, Adam? What you just quoted, is that pretty industry standard, at least here in California?
I would say so. Yeah, somewhere around that number.
Yeah.
Pretty much across the board.
Yeah. What's the same taxpayer requirement?
That's a great question. So I answer this question every day. So I'm still tweaking my response, but basically the same taxpayer who sells a relinquished property must also be the same taxpayer on the purchase. It seems pretty obvious. I mean, the IRS tracks our deferred taxes through our tax ID number, so they want to see it match. But it's important because, if people are looking to co-invest with other people or structure deals in certain ways, it can be complicated, and so they need to know.
I was going to ask, like, does it have to be only that person, or like if husband had a property and then wants to buy one with wife, like he can't add her, or
just business partner?
Business partner or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, California, and this is probably a better question for you, but we're a community property state, right? So would a husband and wife, adding a spouse to title, still probably filing those taxes jointly. So could that be looked at as the same taxpayer? Yes, right. But in some states, that's not the case. So we have to advise our clients to talk to their CPA and make sure that that's okay to do based on the state that they're in.
I see. But whether you couldn't add a business partner because of that.
No, I mean, what we always recommend is if clients are looking to buy the replacement property with a partner, I think the easiest is like a tenants in common setup where maybe the partner owns a percentage of the property, and then they want to make sure that the percentage they own is equal to or greater than what they sold. So if they sell for $1 million and they buy for $2 million, the other partner can own 50%.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I can see why that would.
And do a lot of people do that in LLCs? It seems like that would be pretty common to own the first property in an LLC and then exchange it for something else.
Yeah, we see a lot of, single member LLCs, revocable living trusts are really common entities to hold real estate in. And fortunately, both of those are typically disregarded entities on their tax returns. So they can either buy in the single member LLC again or in their individual names, just as long as the tax ID number matches.
Makes sense.
Interesting. And, the whole reason you guys have a business around this is because of that rule that the person can't take possession of the funds. Like, I have also had clients say, I sold the property and I'm going to do a 1031 exchange. And I'm like, well, did you get the money? And they're like, yep. I'm like, then you're not doing that.
Yes, that is the most heartbreaking call.
Yeah. Do you get those calls too?
Oh yes, always. It's always after escrow closed and the check has been dispersed and I have to deliver the bad news. Unfortunately, you're unable to do an exchange. We have to have it set up before escrow closes.
So it's just black and white like that. There's no exceptions, it sounds like.
No exceptions. We'll set up exchanges the day escrow closes. So I've had last minute calls from clients saying, hey, we need to get this set up before it closes. It closes today and we've got
Oh my
it done.
gosh, that sounds
But
stressful.
that's not fun for anybody.
No. Yeah, that does not sound fun, but it's like, I guess, like, well, can't really turn the business. Would you charge a premium for that?
No,
You should.
You should.
it'll be 1% for those deals.
Right?
Yeah, pain and suffering.
Oh my gosh. So, if a house was a residence in the past, can you still, but then it's a rental, can you do a 1031?
Yeah, so you can convert a primary to a rental property to, in the future, qualify for a 1031 exchange. Typically, you'd want to probably rent it for 2 years before you're fully qualified. And you would actually qualify for the primary residence exclusion as well, because if it's your primary for 2 of the last 5 years, there's a potential for you to qualify for that exclusion. And then you would 1031 exchange the other portion. So there is a way to combine it in that instance. And I always tell my clients, it can be prorated to an extent. So they always need to talk to their CPA and find out exactly what the benefits are for them.
And how do you define rent? Like, could you have your deadbeat adult child rent it? What's the definition of it, of it being a business property or whatever the definition is?
Right. Well, should be income producing. Some land is not, though, but when it comes to family members, you do have to charge fair market rent for it to qualify. So that's going to vary by everyone's definition, but essentially you can't charge them $1. You need to charge them a fair market for that property. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of clients that like to help their family out with that. As long as they're pretty much charging fair market, they have a lease in place. This is an investment property and they file it. They claim the income on their taxes. Everything needs to be business for that property.
Yeah. Not that we've ever seen a deadbeat adult child before. But, I was just thinking, like, theoretically, you could, like, rent it, make them pay you, and then turn around and gift back the money, right? Not that I would recommend that to anybody.
Tax return, I don't think. Yeah. But yes, you could do that.
But then they have to have the money in the first place, and the deadbeats usually don't.
Right.
That is the hard part.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a interesting situation because I feel like there's so many rentals in San Diego in general. I mean, I just look at my street in Ocean Beach, and well, first of all, I have clients that own 4 to 5 houses on the street that I know for sure are being rented, so it's there's a lot of rentals, a lot of people that are landlords, and there's also a lot of buying and selling of properties. I mean, it's just a lot in San Diego. So I'm sure there's probably areas of the country where this isn't as big of a business, right? But around here, it seems like it would be something that is definitely needed.
Yeah, and we have we're such a big military town, and one of the coolest things I see military members do is they buy a rental wherever they live, and so they keep moving around to different bases, and they're buying a primary, turning it into a rental, moving to the next place.
Oh, wow.
And they end up with a portfolio of properties.
That's great. It's good to hear, actually.
You end up with a lot of de facto investors almost by accident.
So you can sell a property here in California and buy a business property in Arizona or Florida or Texas. It doesn't matter where, or does it matter?
Anywhere in the country is qualified for a 1031 exchange. It's domestic for domestic. So you can't go to Cancun and buy a dream rental property or something.
But you could sell a single family residence here that you rented out and met all the qualifications for here and buy a Chick-fil-A in Texas. Could you do that?
Absolutely. Okay. Any real property held for productive use in a trade or business.
Hmm.
And that's kind of one of the biggest benefits too, is some of our investors they're tired of certain asset classes, like office product is getting killed right now. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're looking to exit office product, or, maybe they just don't like multifamily and they want more retail. And this is the solution to help them move their money into what they think is going to be the best
And that's
investment.
where that like property comes into play, but it really can be pretty different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So you could sell a duplex and buy a office complex or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a client today actually asking about, living in the property, right? And the 1031 exchange is investment for investment property. But if you buy a property of larger value, there is a potential for you to live in one of the units. So an example of that would be your client selling a $500,000 condo, but they found a duplex for $1 million. They can live in half the property as long as they're renting out $500,000 worth of real estate.
Huh. Yeah, so there's lots of kind of little wiggle room in all of it.
Yeah.
Because I
You
always
must,
thought if you sell this, then you have to buy, something very similar,
Right. Yep. And almost everybody thinks the same thing. Every day I get a call where people think, "Gosh, I just don't want to find another condo." And it's like, well, good news. You don't
Yeah,
have
right.
so you must work closely with people's accountants, with clients' accountants, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, everyone's different with their accountants. A lot of my CPAs say they don't know about it until after it happens.
Yeah, we're
They're
usually the last to know a lot of things too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey, by the way, last year I did this multi-million-dollar transaction without consulting you.
Oh my gosh. Yep. Yeah, that happens frequently. Is there ever a situation where you talk to somebody and you think the 1031 is not the right tool for them? And then are there other tools in this tax deferral toolbox?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the 1031 exchange is just not right for them. There's some of my very affluent investors, they might have some capital gain losses on their books that they can use when that property sells to offset the gain that they had. There's certain people that in their portfolio, it just doesn't make sense for them. So I talk people out of the 1031 exchange all the time, just if it's not the right situation for them, or maybe the 45 days is too stressful, and I give them all the strategies, but at the end of the day, if they're not comfortable with that, then then that's not what's best for them.
Adam, do
Yeah.
you help people find and identify the new property, or is that is that just like an agent's job? I mean, who's out there helping that client find the new property in Texas or Florida?
Right. So no, I don't get involved in any of the brokerage or any of the, helping people find replacement properties. If I have an off-market deal that might be a good suit for an investor, I can send it over to them, but I'm not going to be involved with that transaction in any way. We really want to be a third-party intermediary that's not involved in the transaction other than what the capacity that we're in.
And
But
are there legal requirements that you are independent like that? Probably, right?
I mean, it's never good to mix too much of,
Right.
we're supposed to be a third party. So when you start brokering deals and doing other things, maybe there's not a legal issue with it technically, but I also, a big chunk of my clients come from real estate brokers, and I don't want them to think of me as competition,
Right.
I'm just there to play my role, consult with the client, make sure they're not making any mistakes so that they can defer their taxes.
I was just thinking, somebody had mentioned opportunity zones as an alternative too. What do you know about those? Did you ever get involved with any of those?
Yeah, I know a little bit about them. Opportunity zones are definitely an alternative to a 1031 exchange. Maybe an alternative for a failed 1031 exchange if
Right.
they, need another option. They haven't been around long enough, though, for me to have a real opinion on how
Yeah,
profitable they
that
are.
was the sense I got too. And I do have a client that's invested in one right now. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all plays out. And my understanding of it, and maybe you can help me piece it together because I don't know a whole lot either, but they're basically areas of cities that the government has defined as needing improvement. And so if you loan the money to build a building or improve something to this opportunity zone, then you get deferral or maybe for even full forgiveness of your capital gain. I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, I believe there's a partial forgiveness after a certain length of time that the money's been invested. It's always interesting to me how they decided what was going to be an opportunity zone.
Mm-hmm.
Surprised anything in San Diego County would be considered an opportunity zone, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. We'll have to see how they turn out.
Yeah, it is. That's politics, right? How all those get defined, I'm sure. So, those were like kind of all my questions. Is there anything else you feel like we should tell people about, 1031s? Or definitely feel like I learned a lot more about the 1031 because I kind of felt like before I knew just enough to be dangerous, which is good because, I know enough to say, call Adam, right?
Perfect. That's all you
Yeah,
need.
exactly. That's where I am with a lot of different, because in Trust and Estates, we touch a lot of different things. We touch real
Right.
estate, and we touch, sometimes family law, we touch business law. And, I'll always bring in that other professional. I'm not trying to get into that, but it's like I do get to learn a lot about that, which is kind of a fun part, I think, of our area of the law, is that we get to meet a lot of different disciplines. We're talking to the financial planners and the CPAs, and so I know like a little bit about like stocks and investments, and so it's nice to have a little bit of knowledge on everything. Although some days I'm like, where am I going to put anything else in this brain?
Yeah,
That's why we
sometimes I feel like
specialize in what we do, right?
sometimes I feel like my investors, I'm so interested on how they accumulated, 100 properties, and they're just
Yeah.
trying to get me off the phone. I'm like, no, I want to learn.
It's so interesting. I mean, I've had clients that were they were both teachers and they accumulated all this property, and I'm like, how did you do this? And they're like, we just saved, and I think part of that might be a bygone era, but it's interesting, like you were saying about the military families, so it's like it is possible to to accumulate real estate and wealth, despite often your income level, really. So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
it is interesting to hear how people accumulate things, and properties and wealth, and obviously we get an inside track to that quite a few times.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
another interesting part of our job. You can hear all the gory details and
I know. Yeah.
family drama. Get all that
Oh yeah.
too.
I
Yeah,
bet lots of that.
yeah. You probably get to stay a little bit away from that at least.
Yeah, sometimes. I had a client recently. I had to talk to 5 different family members about their sale, and they all disagreed. So that was
Oh yeah,
entertaining.
I we've had those clients too. Like you tell them what to do, and then it's like, well, they come back, well, so and so said this, and so and so said that, and I'm like, oh gosh,
I saw on YouTube that you could do this. Oh,
right.
did you?
Like, didn't you hire me because you wanted me to handle this? Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for educating us and our viewers on 1031 exchanges. It was fun to chat with you and learn more about, your business and what a 1031 exchange is. And so those of you watching, if you want to get a hold of Adam, you can find him at ax1031.com. And of course, you can find us at lawgbs.com. So thank you again, Adam, for being here. And thanks to everyone that tuned in.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah, take care. We'll see you soon, hopefully.
You've been tuning into Simplifying the Complicated with your hosts, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.